Should we go microphone?
Okay. Is there a restroom nearby? Yeah. Thank you.
Moderator, so I can introduce you and read some things on your resume, or if you'd like to talk about it yourself.
No, I'd rather kind of give a little personal history. I don't even need that. Mic is working.
Let me turn that off. Okay, I believe it's about time to go ahead and get started. I guess if it weren't for everybody sitting in the back, we wouldn't even need this microphone. But my job today is to moderate this question and answer session, so I will be running the microphone back and forth to you. But we're honored to have Dr. Seymour here as a presidential candidate for us for the next presidency at Cleveland State Community College. And I offered to introduce, but he'd like to tell a little bit about himself and his history and his background. So we'll just go ahead and move right on into the session. Welcome.
All right, can you hear me now? Sounds like a commercial. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for coming. My name is Bill Seymour. My friends call me Bill. You'll see William on the resume and other places, but very happy to be here at Cleveland State. If I say Jackson State by accident today, it's just because I'm not thinking real well, because I say it a million times every day at my work. But currently Vice President for Institutional Advancement at Jackson State Community College, and very happy to be there. I've been in higher education for, I almost hate to say it, 33, 34 years now. And so I've enjoyed being an educator all that time. I came to Tennessee about 18 years ago, so I have some time in East Tennessee. I was at Maryville College for almost 15 years as Vice President for Dean of Students, and also Vice President for Administrative Services there the last 6 years. So East Tennessee is home. That's where our daughters grew up, and we made a home there. I'd like to introduce my wife, Catherine. She's here with us this morning, Catherine Seymour. And I have a feeling I've got two daughters who may be watching on the internet tonight, or this afternoon. So hi, Jessica. Hi, Blair. This is kind of strange being filmed and doing this. I've got a sister in New York State and a sister in Florida that I think are watching as well. So sunshine laws are very interesting things. I wasn't used to it in the private schools, but I certainly understand the need to make sure that all stakeholders have an opportunity to participate in a process that's very important to our community college here at Cleveland State. Like I said, I've been in higher education for 33 years. I did my undergraduate work at the State University of New York, a cold little place in Oswego on the eastern end of Lake Ontario, and I've been living in the South ever since. And that was on purpose. Spent a lot of time in Missouri, did all my graduate work at the University of Missouri, and glad to have them in the SEC. They're doing well. I did like the game Saturday, I'm sorry to say, if you're a Vol fan with that, but did my master's in counseling and personnel services at Mizzou, and then got my PhD in higher and adult education. And so my whole family are educators. My dad was a school teacher and principal. My sisters are teachers. My aunts and uncles are all teachers. I just went education a little bit different direction and got into administration. Most of my background has been in student services. Part of my time has been with administrative services as well, but also in institutional advancement. That's what I'm currently doing at Jackson State. So I've got two daughters. They're twins, 29 years old. They've just given us our second and third grandchild. And the interesting thing is that within the last 6 weeks, we've had two grandchildren. One was born on September 20th, the other on October 2nd. So we've been burning up the road between Jackson, Nashville, and Maryville. And so there is an attraction to coming back to East Tennessee and being a little bit closer to our family. So I could go on all day about me, but I think you guys have questions that you want to ask. I want to be as responsive as I can to the things that interest you, because I'm very interested in this position. I believe in the TBR system. I've come to love community colleges, the diversity that they offer in terms of their education, and the students that come here are very exciting to me. And having had an experience as a president previously has motivated me greatly to come back to that position. If we're lucky in life, we go through a lot of different jobs and opportunities, and we get into one where it just feels like this is where I'm supposed to be. This is where I can make the most impact. And so I'm very proud to work for the citizens of Tennessee. Been loving that in Jackson, and we do regard that as our home, but my friends know that the only thing that would take me away is a president's job, and I want to be able to expand my service to the citizens of Tennessee, and I think I can do that in great fashion through president of Cleveland State Community College.
Questions?
All right, let's go.
Hi, Rick Creasy, Workforce Development.
Yes.
As you know, right now there's a misalignment between whether it's secondary, post-secondary education with what industry is really looking for in terms of hiring new employees. What's your thoughts on that? How would you address that? And what would your strategy be for workforce development?
Workforce development is probably one of the most significant things happening in higher education right now, particularly for community colleges. And right now, I don't think there's any type of higher education institution that's more relevant than a community college, and a lot of it has to do with the workforce development. We've been spending a lot of time with that at Jackson State, and we recognize that students that are going through our two-year programs going into the workforce are making a huge impact, but there is a gap that's existing right now. We just had a program on our campus that our office, Institutional Advancement, conducted with our Workforce Development Office. It was called a Manufacturing Partnership Summit. And the idea was to connect education, industry, and the community together to learn more about these issues. We wanted to make sure they understood about the opportunities that exist in modern manufacturing and in industry. Now, I don't have an experience myself as a background. That's just not the way I came up, but I've been learning a great deal about it at Jackson State. And we're working very closely with our manufacturers in Jackson. One in particular, Bodine, they make aluminum engine blocks for Toyota. And so there's the whole Toyota model, which is extraordinary, but they've been helpful to us in organizing other manufacturers in our community to develop a new program for maintenance engineers and all kinds of manufacturing positions to try to deal with this gap that exists. What we're finding out is that the community colleges have been good about dealing with a lot of the technology issues, but they're not necessarily preparing individuals to address all the needs that manufacturers have in their jobs. That there's all kinds of skills that make you good in the workplace, about showing up on time, dressing appropriately, decision-making skills, all those soft skills that really make a difference. So we're developing a co-op program in our community, and we now have, I think, 15 or 16 manufacturers that have jumped on board. Students that go into this program, first of all, they'll be paid by their company. They'll come to class at Jackson State 2 days a week, and they'll be on the job 3 days a week. And we see this as an excellent way to kind of bring that whole thing together. The reality is that these employers have jobs available, good paying jobs, but they're not finding people with the right skills. And I think nobody's better positioned to help solve that problem and close that gap than community colleges. So I think as community colleges move forward, we're always going to have that base of the degree transfer students. But we can probably play the most important role in closing that gap and providing people for the workplace in our community. So I think it's at the top of the list right now in terms of how we advance community colleges. Did that answer your question, sir? Okay.
We all have our opinions about college-ready students. What's your opinion on that? And what kind of programs we do, dual enrollment, recruitment? How do you feel about that?
About preparing students for college and making sure people are more prepared and able to succeed?
What's your opinion on being ready for college?
Right.
And what processes can we put into place to make them ready?
Sure. The one thing that's most unique about a community college is that we're open access. We're here for everybody. Not many other colleges or universities can say that. So that makes us unique. That's also a great challenge. There's many things that we can do, and I've been involved with at Jackson State that help prepare people for college. One is the dual enrollment program. If my kids are going through high school again, I would make sure that they took advantage of dual enrollment. It's an amazing way to get a head start, to learn more about college level work, and kind of get a head start on everything. So it sounds like Cleveland State does a really good job of that in our area here to get more high school students involved. At Jackson State, we wanted to advance that even further, so we just changed our pricing at Jackson State to match the state grant so that virtually they're taking that class for free. And what that did was that it brought a whole group of other high school students into the picture, because if it was based upon ability to pay, there'd only be a certain demographic that could afford to do it. Now every student that has ability can take one of our dual enrollment classes. And so that's one of the things we've done recently. The other thing is what they call the sales program. The sales program now, and I know Cleveland State was very involved with this at the beginning. Jackson State was a partner in the whole pilot project. But this is a program where they go into the high schools and they're trying to prepare students in math to pass their competencies so that they basically get their learning support classes out of the way so they can come right into college and start taking college level classes. That helps with time to completion, helps with the retention rates, and so that's a very important aspect as well. But I think it's really important for the community college to partner with the local schools here as well. I talked with your city manager, Ms. Castile, a couple weeks ago to kind of pick her brain, and I know they're wanting to build another elementary school here in town, that they're trying to put a greater focus on education. And to me, the partnership between Cleveland State and the schools in this area, both in the city and the county and in all the surrounding counties that Cleveland State serves, is really where that connection needs to be. But I think through programs like sales programs, through dual enrollment, but also the Tennessee Achieves programs. In our area, we call it Madison Achieves because it's Madison County. But these are programs, those last dollar programs, that are helping students that have high need to get into college and receive the counseling to make that happen. And so I interact with all those through our enrollment management programs, but also in terms of working with our outreach to the community to try to develop relationships with the high schools. All right.
Can I ask a quick question? How you
Sir.
adjusted pricing for those dual enrollment courses?
Well, the state grant is $300, and so we put our price down to $300. Now, we knew in terms of a budget process for the college, we needed to have a much higher head count to make up for that. But we kind of see it, if you were a store of some kind of a loss leader, in the fact that we want to get people in the door. If we can get more high school students involved with those programs and have more experience with those college level classes in particular, have those classes with us, and I think that's going to roll over into higher enrollments down the road. So I think that's a really good investment.
Next question.
I know it's after lunch.
You've said that your background is primarily student services and institutional effectiveness. What type of activities have you been involved in or could foresee being involved in to support the academic programs of the college?
When you've been involved with higher education for 30 plus years, it's very difficult not to appreciate what is the core mission of any institution, whether it's a large state university, small private, community college. I've never had the privilege of being a day-to-day faculty member. I've taught some graduate classes, leadership courses, orientation courses, things of that nature. But I have the awareness and the familiarity. I actually go back to my founding in student affairs, both in terms of being a new professional, but also a graduate student. And one of the founding documents for the, if you go to National Association of Student Personnel Administrators, these are all deans of student types. And when they were forming that profession, back in 1937, they have a document called the Student Personnel Point of View, and it lists 10 or 12 different principles that indicate the importance of that profession. And the number one component in that document says the academic mission of the college is preeminent. And that's something that I've learned from the very beginning and appreciate. My approach in student affairs has been that every staff member at a college or university is an educator. I think we should use that word whether we're on the custodial staff or working in the admissions office or financial aid or whatever it is. And we just had this conversation on our campus recently when we were talking about some of the earlier stages for our next SACS accreditation process. And it's the appreciation that everybody is an educator and that people who work outside the classroom are responsible for shaping the environment that allows faculty members to do their jobs to the best ability that they have. And so I believe that a president, even though they have a great appreciation for what faculty do, I don't need to know how to design a class or a course syllabus. We have experts in the classrooms that do that. We have experts in academic affairs that do that. As president, I want to make sure I provide you all the resources and support to develop those classes, to look at new courses that you might want to develop that are going to strengthen our enrollment and offerings to the community. And so even though I don't have that as a strong background in terms of teaching, I couldn't have a stronger appreciation and respect for what our faculty do, but I would know that my job as a president is to make sure that you have all the support and resources to do the best job possible so we can get those students to be retained and complete. And that's our ultimate goal, to sustain the mission of the institution. Thank you for your question.
I'm sure you've been looking at Cleveland State just as we have been looking at you.
Yes.
And so what would you consider to be the top concerns here at Cleveland State, and how would you address them?
Well, part of my visit here is to learn about those concerns. So I've had 2 meetings already with senior staff. We've had a little bit of a discussion about that. But I'm not sure the concerns that you have here are terribly different than what we may be experiencing at Jackson State in West Tennessee. There's a great shift that's happening in higher education right now, and particularly for community colleges. And the state of Tennessee has been doing an amazing job to focus on education. Both Governor Bredesen and now Governor Haslam have been making this a top priority. The whole Complete College Act of 2010 has said very clearly that we need to change how we do business in higher education. So to me, that's one of the top issues that we would face at Cleveland State, is how do we get more focused as a campus community, as a faculty and staff, about getting students to succeed. The story is no longer about how many students come and enroll and sit in the seats in the fall semester, but how many students graduate at the end of their program. And that's the way it should be. We're about teaching and getting people to succeed and graduate and develop those skills so they can be productive citizens in their jobs and their careers. So to me, I'd want to keep pushing on the whole complete college agenda. To me, that's a game changer. And some of the campuses have been making great success with that. And even within certain campuses, you get some people who've gotten on board and some others have not. So I'd like to find out more what has been the case here at Cleveland State in terms of that process. I have seen the enrollment management plan that I think Dr. Stokes has chaired, and to me that's a very good strategic plan, looking at enrollment goals and all the issues that go into that, both in terms of recruitment, retention, course development. It has to be that comprehensive. I have a very strong background in strategic planning, and that's something that I think I can help with. So enrollment is huge, but then also the whole aspect of completing and making that happen. We have to change our attitudes in higher education. I'll use Jackson State as an example. I'm not trying to speak poorly of them, but when I came in there, I saw a campus that was very focused on doing what they've been doing for several years. There has not been much change. Their concept of student engagement was to get out of their way, that if students were left to do their own thing, we didn't put up any roadblocks, then they would enroll, and then they might have a better chance of succeeding. Now the focus is on how can we better engage students in the whole activity of being college students and be more hands-on with them, be more directive with them. Many of the students that come to community colleges don't have a lot of background. Many are first-generation college attenders. And so I think we deserve to provide them the help and support that they need. An example of that is we started a program at Jackson State called Great Expectations. And this is our incoming orientation and registration process. Up until we started that program, we had no orientation, really. Students could go online and register themselves, students who probably have never been to college before or had very little assistance. We required them now to come to this program, and we saw that as a great challenge, because how do we make 1,200, 1,300 students go through a common experience? Well, we did 104 sessions over the summer of 2012. We did them during the day, we did them during the evening, we did them through our off-campus centers. And it was very labor-intensive, but we knew that if we took that effort and engaged students in that way and provided a quality first registration process, then we could really improve on that. We also dovetailed that with our student learning initiative, which was focused on online learning. And we saw that many of our students were taking, particularly in their first semester, online classes and doing quite poorly. They were either dropping out or weren't passing. So we combined those efforts together, required students to attend, gave them a great first registration process, made sure that students that shouldn't be in an online class their first semester were not, and our retention rates went up. our failure rates went down. And so we were impacting both academic success as well as retention. So that's the focus I would come in with. We've got the stage set both through the complete college process and now the Access to Success, the A2S initiative that the state is going on. And so if we can continue to look at what we can do to help students succeed, then we're going to be doing the best job that we can. The other thing that I'd like to find out more is what's the relationship with Cleveland State and the city of Cleveland and the county, in your county and our service region. What's the relationship with Chattanooga State down the road? What's our relationship with manufacturers? Again, as I mentioned, I think manufacturing and preparing the workforce is the top of the list. So continuing on with the complete college process, trying to look at enrollment, getting students started in a way that they can be successful, providing those support services that will get them to complete, I think will help whether they are looking for a degree transfer or whether they're looking to get in the job force. And then also along with that, workforce development being top two issues. Thank you. I'll hear you.
Yes, Dr. Seymour. I have a question from a viewer.
Uh-oh.
He just texted me saying, I'm watching, could you ask my question? And so the question has to do with your time at Lambda. If you could kind of describe the challenges that you faced there and maybe lessons learned.
Absolutely. If you've looked at my resume, you saw that I spent a couple of years at Lambuth University in Jackson. That's what got me out to Jackson. Previous to that, like I said, I was at Maryville College for 14 and a half years or so. And so at that time, I was very heavily invested in the small, private, church-related setting. And so our daughters are grown and gone, and we were looking for a new adventure. I found one. And it's one of those things where I think there is something to be said for a sense of calling. I believe in that. And I felt called to go to that institution and try to take what I had learned over the years to see what I could do to help that institution move on. And there's no question about it. It was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done. And as we talked about at lunch, I don't think I could have learned what I learned about myself. I was stretched in ways I never felt possible. I learned what my capacity was for doing work and a lot of work. I think I handled the stress pretty well, although I had a full head of hair before I started that job, I think. But it was a very difficult situation. By the time I got there, they'd already been placed on probation by Saks. They were in terrible financial situation. A couple board members who were underwriting many programs had already left. And so, I had some friends who said, why in the world are you going there? And it was a legitimate question. But I think bottom line, we knew that we couldn't get hurt by doing it. I could learn a lot, but I had a lot I could offer that institution. So we went through 2 very difficult years looking for every possible way that we could move the institution forward under its own footing. At the same time, we were looking for ways in which we could find financing, but trying to do that in 2010 was a huge challenge with the economy the way that it was. And so I became very familiar with Saks in ways that a lot of schools don't want to become familiar with, but I did learn that system quite well. And even though it was a difficult process with Saks, I became not only knowledgeable but familiar with their processes. And so I believe in what Saks has to do. A lot of times people think about accreditors as this evil ogre that's coming down to do some harm to us, but they are standard bearers. They're putting out the rationale and reason why we need to do great things every day. So it shouldn't be an alarming or distasteful thing to go through that process every 10 years. It's what helps us maintain the quality and the focus that we need. But in the end, we did decide that Lambuth was going to close as we knew it, as a private church-related college. We'd worked with the church, we worked with all kinds of possible investors, and couldn't find the answers. And so in January of 2011, as an alternative, I started looking for ways in which we could literally sell the institution. And so we had 3 different colleges that had an interest, but in Jackson, the biggest interest was how do we take this college and actually not only keep it going, but develop it into something that currently didn't exist in the city of Jackson. Jackson has some wonderful private institutions, and the only public was Jackson State, but they didn't have a 4-year public option there. And so I started working with Dr. Raines, the president of University of Memphis, and she had an interest in the campus. And we started working with our city and county mayors. So again, by going through this process, I showed that I could develop those kinds of relationships and work collaboratively, not only with the people on campus, but in the community to make something happen. We got our Jackson Energy Authority, our primary utility provider, involved. We have a huge public hospital in Jackson. They got involved. And in the end, we went through a process where those 4 local entities decided that they were going to put up the money to buy the campus, with this distinct plan of turning that over to the state of Tennessee, with the plan of providing that to the University of Memphis. And now that campus is the University of Memphis Lambeth campus, and they are doing great. They're back up to about 800 students. They are an anchor for that community, and it's provided something to the Jackson community that they never had before. So now that I look at it a year or two later, I obviously have less stress about it, and I see it as a success story. At the time, it was hard to do that because there was just so much anxiety about going through that change. But I think we handled that in the best way possible. We kept our people together. Our faculty and staff were true blue. Their color was blue too, to the very end. And at the end, we took care of the students. And that was the most important thing for me. In the end, we either got them graduated on time, or we got them transferred to another institution who accepted all their credits. You do what's called a teach-out program. These are transfer agreements you do with other institutions. And we developed 7 of those opportunities, and they all got to go to another school. Didn't cost them any more money. It might have been a little inconvenient, but all their credits transferred. And so I think we bowed out of that in the best way possible, but at the same time, brought back an institution that's thriving in our community. And so again, not only did I learn about my capacity for work, but I had to network with the city officials, the county officials, TBR officials. Got very involved with them. So it was kind of ironic that as I got through all that and worked myself out of a job, I went to work for TBR and found a home there. So that's kind of the background. If you have more specific questions about Lambeth, I'd be glad to answer those as well. Yeah.
Can you share with us how you stay connected with students and the current student issues?
Okay, our question was, how do I stay connected with students and student issues? Well, that's kind of an easy one for me, coming with a student affairs background. Being a dean of students or a vice president for student services over the years, if I wasn't paying attention to students, I wasn't doing my job. And so that focus stays with me today, and I think would be a strong point for me as a college president, is that I think of the student first. What's the impact on the student? And if I think about my past, I've done about everything possible to interact with students that you can imagine, from leadership development with student government, promoting student organizations. I've worked on residential campuses. And one thing nice about working on a community college campus, they all go home at night. It's a whole different dynamic when they spend the night and things go on there. And so we have to be intentional about it. The biggest challenge, as many of you know, is that at a community college, they drive to school, they get out of their car, they go to class, and they get back in their car and they go home. And I've seen schools that have basically thrown up their hands and say, there's not much we can do about that, so they've given up. And that's not my approach. I don't give up on much. I know it's a bigger challenge, but that means we have to do more work to make that happen. And I think we have some students here today, and I think it's about making those opportunities available, that we talk with them about, what do you want to do? What's going to get you more connected with other students? What's going to get you more connected with faculty and staff? We have a nice theater here, but I understand we don't do any theater productions anymore. You know, why don't we bring back a theater group? Why don't we do something that's both a college and community theater group as an example? I think not only does that provide more opportunities for your students to get involved and engage, but it also brings people in from the community to participate. And the more that we get people from the community on the Cleveland State campus, the more I think that relates to enrollments down the road. So to me, getting students engaged is a natural, but I certainly recognize the challenge that exists on a community college campus. Our students, I mean, I was looking at the we participate, we call it the CSE, the Community College Survey of Student Engagement. And I studied that really heavily when I first got involved with student services at Jackson State. And we had, I think it was something like 60% of our students or more have a job outside of college. 30% were working full-time. And then if you look at the time that they spend involved with family or taking care of people in their family, the hours were huge, and over 30% were putting in over 30 hours a week in child care or family care. So what I've come to learn very quickly is our students are juggling so many different things. You know, and I try to compare it to a traditional age 4-year college student that might be living on campus. And I did that for years, but now I look at it and say, what did they really have to stress over? They had a roof over their head, they're getting meals every day. They just had to get themselves up in the morning and go to class. Our students have jobs, they're taking care of families, and with all the things they got going on, if something in their life goes wrong, what's the first thing they give up? School. They're not going to give up their family, they're not going to give up their job, and so it says to us, how do we help them manage that? We just can't let them go it alone. We need to provide the support services. We need to hook them into agencies and programs in the community that can provide support. We need to help them out as best we can with financial aid. And so that's what it all boils down to. And it's not just a numbers game. Yes, we want more retention, we want more completers, but the way to make that happen is that we truly engage people in the most meaningful ways on a person-to-person basis. And that's where it has to happen. And that's the tough thing. When you've got, 3,500 students at a school, you think, well, how do I impact them all? Well, you impact them all one person at a time. And my approach has been, and when I worked in student services at Jackson State, is it's taking that student one at a time, what are their needs, what's going to help them succeed and stay in school. And over time, that's what happens. When you've got 200 or 300 faculty that are taking that same attitude. So as president, I believe in trying to create a culture within the institution that takes on those kinds of principles. That if we can infuse everybody with that sense of engagement and trying to help each student go from where they are to where they want to succeed, then we're going to make a lot of progress. Did that answer your question? All right, thank you. I think we've got one back here.
Dr. Seymour, I wonder if you could speak to your philosophy regarding the non-traditional delivery of academic courses.
Non-traditional delivery of academic courses, such as online courses, hybrid courses, cohorts. As we went through the Complete College Academy, we spent a lot of time focusing on that because, again, the traditional approach has always been there, and let's face it, times are changing. Our society is different, our economy is different, our students are different, and there's such a great diversity that are there. And we've seen evidence that students that go through as a cohort, that come into a program, that they connect together as individuals, because there's something about a shared experience, that you're going through with a group of students that have the same experience. That's engagement. When you want to talk about student engagement, when they can develop relationships with other students in their programs and have mentors as faculty, that's huge in terms of their attitude about school. I've dealt with the whole issue of retention a great deal over the years, and what makes the biggest difference is that people have a commitment to the institution that they're attending. They have a commitment to the degree that they're trying to achieve, and that commitment is something that has to be developed and nurtured throughout the whole process. So we've seen that happen in nursing programs. We've seen that in some of our workforce development programs, our fast-track programs. That's what engages people in ways that are quite different. To have programs where you can go certain days a week so that you can balance it with work or family. We have to be flexible. We can't keep teaching and operating the same mode that we have for 30 years because that's not where our students are. And so we have to be flexible, and we have to engage each other in that conversation. I've talked with some of the staff earlier today about my philosophy of planning, and I don't have all the answers, but I think we can develop those answers together. I believe in developing an ethic of planning on the college campus such that everybody knows that they have a role to play, that we have processes for communication, that we have processes for decision making, and that we use those to develop the plans that are going to make the most difference. I don't believe in a dictatorial type of a process. It's not all about me in terms of where I work or if I'm president. I want to rely upon the good people that work here on the faculty and staff to engage the students, to learn about the issues that are really important, and develop those solutions that are going to make something happen. So there are a number of new innovative approaches to teaching, but we have to create an atmosphere where people are willing to change, try new things, and for some folks that's easy. For some folks it's not. But I think the more we do it, the more we see those that might be the naysayers or waiting behind, they'll eventually jump on the bandwagon once they see that that's becoming more of the way to go. And so I definitely support that, but I want to learn more from the faculty that are here who have already engaged in those experiences and are seeing the success stories so that we can help communicate that to other faculty. Is there still a question back here?
Well, that was sort of kind of on the lines, big mouth don't need that.
You said it, Joyce.
I know.
Right on.
That was along the lines that I was talking about, now with all that you said, that was fantastic and great. Do you think there should be a age limit of when there should be a type of accelerated type program? Do you think an 18-year-old should be allowed to sort of kind of get a different type of experience than, because they're still sort of kind of a traditional type student when they're 18 years old? Do you think that there should be some type of a age limit on the accelerated type cohort type program?
Does everybody hear the question about cohort programs, accelerated? Is everybody ready for that? Should there be an age limit perhaps? I don't have a hard and fast answer for that, but I think it's a great question without any doubt. But I think a lot of it has to do with the individual. It's kind of like what we did with our students. We do a survey with our students during our orientation registration program about their online readiness. And a lot of it has to do with their personal skills, not so much the actual technology that they have available to them, even though that's important, but do they have the self-discipline to do an online class by themselves? And so we actually had them fill out a survey, and based upon the results of that, we advised them as to whether or not they should or should not go into an online class in their first semester. And we saw some really good results with that. Our numbers of failures and withdrawals from online classes went down by about 12% the first time we did it. So I think the same thing could be said for those types of programs. If there's a way to assess those students, whether they're 18 or 80, I'm not sure, but do they have the ability to participate in that type of learning experience and do well at that? So I'd be more interested, rather than looking at an age requirement, trying to assess their readiness and ability to take on that, both in terms of technical issues as well as their personal attributes that would indicate whether or not they have the skills to do that. Other questions? I'm here all day.
Sorry, I'm singing, Craig. 5 shout and 5 shout nots on the president's plate.
The I shall and I shall not.
5 shall. What are 5 things that should be on your plate and 5 things that should not be on your plate as president?
Well, okay, good question. 5 things I shall have on my plate. One thing would be is that I treat everybody with respect. My philosophy on doing this job, and I certainly felt this was true when I had the experience at Lambeth University, is that my job is no important than anybody else's. Being president is not an ego thing for me. I'm interested in this job because I want to see what we can achieve. And so one of those things is to make sure that I treat everybody with respect, that I approach the job with a certain amount of humility. A third thing is that I shall involve people, because I think that's the way it works best. I shall be a good listener. I'll be a great planner. I'll be a great community engager. So those are, is that 5? At least 5? Those are the things that came off the top of my head, but those kind of describe how I operate. And these can be taken both ways, a shall or shall not. I shall be honest with the people I work with. I'm trying to think, it's like Jeopardy. How do I phrase it the right way? The other thing that is really important to me is that I trust folks. My approach to things is that I trust you until you give me a reason not to trust you. It's kind of that trust-distrust paradigm. Some folks approach things that I'm not going to trust you till you prove to me I can trust you. That doesn't work for me. Sometimes I get burned, but I'd rather be on that side. Did I say listening? I really like listening. Right now I'm talking more than I'm used to talking. But I learn more by listening to folks and trusting what they have to tell me. The other thing that I think is really important is that I be very visible. If I'm sitting behind my desk too much, that's not a good thing. I don't enjoy it. I don't feel good. I got to get up and move around. So I think there's a part of leadership that happens by walking around, by being visible, by participating. And that's not to look over people's shoulders. I think it's important for folks on a college campus to know that the president cares, that he cares enough to meet people where they are, whether it's in the classroom or out on the campus or at the snack bar or whatever that might be, to participate and be involved in the things that are happening on campus. There's certain things I may not do anymore, but back in earlier days, I've done everything from kiss a pig or take a pie in the face or dunking booth or those kinds of things. So there's part of it where you want to show students that you want to participate and get involved. I think there's certain things that don't happen after a certain age, but that's been my approach to interacting with students and faculty and staff. You know, I like to have a good time. I think you need to enjoy yourself where you work. And that I need to model that to my staff. I think they need to model it to their staff. We've got some great work to do. Sometimes it's serious stuff. We've got to deal with policies and procedures and TBR mandates and all those kinds of things. But I like to have an atmosphere where we can enjoy each other as individuals. I think that's highly important. Even though the president ultimately has to make decisions and make final decisions, I want to hear from folks about what their ideas are. I told folks earlier that I think I'm a pretty creative people, and I love to brainstorm ideas, and I'll throw them out there. I won't hold them back, and some of them will be stupid. But once in a while, you get a great one that comes out. And so I'd rather have folks interact in that way where they can express themselves freely, share their ideas, and recognize that sometimes it might not be a great idea, but we're going to find some things that are going to take us further. And so I think several of those things could be an I shall or I shan't. You could probably take it either way, but I think it gives you a flavor for how I like to interact on a campus, how I like to work with people, how I want to be visible and participate. And I really do believe connecting in the community. Wherever I've lived, I've felt getting involved in nonprofits and volunteering, serving on boards is not just, to me, it's not a resume builder. It's a way in which I make that community feel like home. And so right now I'm really into the arts. And so I serve on the symphony board in Jackson. We've got a great symphony. I never would have imagined it when I moved to Jackson. And really enjoying that because we're going through a process to hire a new conductor right now. I serve on the Jackson Arts Council. My personal thing is singing in choirs. I say I have a great voice that blends well with others. Don't give me a solo, but I can blend with anybody. I've been on the board for the Boys and Girls Club and so those are things I've just done in the last few years. And I'm not trying to brag, but I want to give the impression that I'm not just somebody who shows up at the work, but I do engage in the community. And if I did come here to Cleveland, you'd see me get engaged in that way because we need to make those relationships happen. You know, the president, for whatever reason, they're the front person. They're the ones that people are going to recognize in the community. That if I can form those relationships, and I've already talked with your city manager, I've talked with your county mayor last week, I called them up and said, I want to know what issues you think are important right now in Cleveland and Bradley County. What are the best ways in which we at Cleveland State can interact with local officials so that we can make that relationship the best possible and solve problems jointly together? I think they're kind of surprised that I called, but they were great to talk to me. And so that's the approach I take. You know, the Chamber of Commerce is somebody that I got to develop relationships with. I need to develop relationships with the manufacturers in the area. And it sounds like you have some amazing and great businesses that are here. Those are people that we need to connect with and form partnerships and stronger partnerships so that we can provide those opportunities that relate to our education and our workforce development. Well, I think I rambled on too long with your question, but I appreciate you asking. Are you scoring me on that one?
Yes, I am. I have another question.
All right.
I have a Jeep, and on my way to church yesterday, a gauge came on that I'd never seen before. So
A gauge on your Jeep?
yeah, some
All right.
light came on. I thought, oh boy, what does that mean? So my question to you, if you had a gauge on your arm, I know there's some new phones coming out now that have a little watch attached to it, and it lights up. What are two lights on your gauge that either in your office, that on your watch, will either make you A, go see the mechanic first chance you get, or just get it seen to right that second?
Things that come up on my watch, man, he's good, isn't he? I bet they all know who you are around here, don't they? Good question.
Would you like to repeat that question?
No, I think I got it. And, you know, they're coming out with some pretty fancy watches now that do just about everything that your iPhone and iPad do, and my wife lives on her iPad. I can never get it. Yeah. A gauge on there that would alert me to something. Yeah, that'd be great if we had something that tells you, particularly if you're getting off track and out of line. I guess one of those things would come back to, you know, I want it to tell me if I'm not being a good listener, if I'm not engaging people in the way that I should. I've seen the bureaucracy that happens within TBR, and I'm not trying to knock it, it's just there. It's part of having a large state system. There's a lot of responsibilities and meetings that you go to and things of that nature, and obviously that would be a responsibility of mine as president to attend those and participate. But I'd want that watch to alert me if I wasn't paying attention to the people at I told you I was going to do it, at Cleveland State enough. And we kind of talked about this because there's so many different roles for the president of a community college. There's kind of that political side, there's that community side, there's fundraising side, there's the campus person who's managing things. And even though there's that wide range of responsibilities that's there, I'd want it to tell me if I'm not paying enough attention to the people. Because I think the people that run the college, and that's you guys, the faculty and staff, you're the heart and soul of this place. And if I'm not paying attention to your needs, then I'm not doing my job. So that would be one. A second thing I'd want that watch to tell me, frankly, is if I'm not taking care of myself. I need to be on my job as best I can. I need to keep myself healthy, physically and emotionally, and it's important to be grounded that way. So if I'm not exercising or if I'm not paying attention to my family, then I want to know about that because it's a demanding job. And so I want to be in the best shape I can be physically and emotionally to take on those responsibilities. So those would be the two things. So I got two right, I think. I might not have got the 10 before, but I think I got two there. Who's next?
So many things on the horizon in education, but two that I've been involved with myself recently are competency-based education and analytics or data-driven decision-making. And they may or may not be directly related, but I'd be interested in hearing your take on how you would or could see those implemented campus-wide here at Cleveland State.
Right. Well, there's part of me that really likes the concept of competency-based education. It's such a different dynamic than the classical teacher-student paradigm that's been out there. But the concept I like about it, and this is coming from a person who spent most of his life as an administrator, not as a teacher, but it really speaks to me along the lines that we want every student to succeed. And I think deep down we all want that to happen, but traditional education has been that we put our syllabus together, that these are the benchmarks that students have to succeed, to pass to succeed, as opposed to putting these competencies together and we're going to hit each of those, and once they hit all those, we're done. I really like the concept of moving towards a philosophy that we have the ability to help every student succeed, and it's so difficult in a diverse situation where you've got students of so many different abilities in a classroom. I know that's tough for faculty members. But if we can put that into more of a competency-based system, then I think it allows us to work with each individual student in a way that we move them along those competencies to get them to the point where they're done. You know, years ago, there was this whole sink or swim concept that I think a lot of folks in higher education thought of decades ago. But now it's how to get each student from the point that they come in with to a point where they can pass and succeed. In that there's a challenge and responsibility for faculty members not to weed people out, but how many people can I get to that end point? And so I think those competency-based programs in some ways are a little bit more geared towards that, a little bit less subjective, that they have those benchmarks that they have to succeed. And I'll readily admit that, you know, those kinds of designs are not my forte. That's not my background. But what I want to do is support faculty members who understand how to design those courses and help make that happen. Because I think that's a future that we have to recognize and provide those opportunities to students.
I'm going to use the microphone this time. Okay. I've heard you talk about Cleveland State, City of Cleveland manager, Chat State. We are a 5-county service area north of here, not south of here.
Right.
What do you think about off-site campuses?
I'm sorry, off-site campuses.
Off-site campuses and the business and industry that also resides in those 5 counties. Heard you talking about things here in Cleveland, Bradley County. What do you think about all the other off-sites in those business industries? How are you going to engage and get those students, those campuses, and those industries? What's your thoughts about keeping those together to include them in Cleveland State?
Sure. I think expanding those opportunities for Cleveland State may be one of the best opportunities we have for the future. The reality is, as I looked around campus, you're pretty much physically landlocked here. There's not a lot of room for growth or expansion on this campus. And I don't think you've had a new building built in a long, long time. I was at the Athens campus earlier today, and so that was a great experience. And I come from that background at Jackson State, where we have one in Savannah and Humboldt and Lexington, and we're looking at doing more. And I think that may be the answer here. Convenience is really important for students, particularly in outlying areas, particularly when you're dealing with a lot of folks who may not have a lot of college experience, but they're willing to go down the street around the corner to take a class rather than drive down to Cleveland State. And so what I would do as president is that I need to connect with the leaders in each of those counties and each of those communities. I need to find out what are the needs that they have that they want to expand upon, and then look for creative ways to help make that happen. Now, in our district, we've got 14 counties we serve. It's really huge, and so it is quite a challenge. And at those 3 off-campus centers that we have, the communities own those buildings. They were willing to put up the money or do the bond issue or whatever it was to build those facilities, and then we go in and we operate it and do the classes. Right now, I think with Athens, we're leasing that space, and it sounds like in Madisonville it's at the high school, so it's a little bit different. But I think there are other communities that would like to have a Cleveland State Center there. Money always becomes an issue. They may not have the ability to raise the money. They may not be able to do the bond issue. I did meet with some representatives recently from USDA, and they have some excellent programs for doing long-term loans, like 40-year loans, at very low interest rates, so that if you were to go to a community that had an interest in putting a new center there, then we could work with their city, county officials to say, okay, we're willing to come in here, but we need to find a way to build a facility. Maybe we can look at USDA as an option for getting that money, but it still is a loan that has to be paid back. The other opportunity is, and I really like this, and I know my wife loves this idea, is there's so many businesses and storefronts and things of that nature that have been abandoned. They're closed. And so finding those opportunities where you might be able to get that facility at a very cheap price or a very inexpensive lease and do that. So I think particularly in your situation, because you got just the 5 counties here, You've got a lot of activity going to the south with Chattanooga State, that as we can build more on the north side, then I think you can really enhance your enrollment that way, but it's going to take getting connected with those communities, those officials and leaders. Really, it's a sales job. And the reality is that's a big part of what has to happen. That's an area where I think I have a particular strength. That's been my background, to do a lot of community affairs and communication. That's part of the reason why I get so involved. But by getting to know these people, maybe there's a regional development program. We have a West Tennessee leadership program called West Star. I just did that this past year. I did Leadership Blunt in Blount County. Do you have a Bradley County leadership program? Those are the kinds of things that I'd want to get involved with early on, because they very quickly get you familiar with those people that work in those places. They get you usually to a lot of your manufacturing plants. But I would make it a particular point to start scheduling meetings and visits, touring the manufacturing plants and other industry and businesses in the area. If they get to know me and we can formulate some type of relationship, then those opportunities will develop. And so we have to be proactive. We can't wait for people to come ask us. And so if I hear expressed like you're expressing on behalf of the community that that's something that's desired that we need to do, then it's not just me, but we've got a number of staff and leadership within the institution that we can organize a process to go look for those opportunities.
Were your campuses all built from the ground up, or were they?
I'm sorry?
All your off-campus centers, were they all built from the ground up? Or?
The ones at Jackson State were developed from the ground up. But it was through a process of working with those communities. They were interested enough that they were going to develop the funding for those centers. But, and I know how it works because you're dealing with a very rural area. And that's very similar. Once you get out of Jackson, Tennessee, our 14-county service area is very rural. And so you're dealing with a lot of folks that are going to be first-generation college attenders. And in many cases, they're not comfortable coming to what they consider the big city of Jackson, Tennessee, but they may go down the road to the center that's very close and nearby. I think we develop as many good relationships as we can with what was used to be known as the TTCs. They're our partners. The reality is TBR is very diverse. There's 13 community colleges, 26 or 27 TCATs as they call them now. But also all the universities. And what I've kind of seen my first years into the program is sometimes they see themselves as competing entities where they don't have to be. We all should be really working together. We're part of the same family, so to speak. And so I would reach out to the TTCs and the other community colleges. I mean, we're something very distinct and different from Chat State. My approach is that Cleveland State takes a back seat to nobody. I think that's the approach you got to take. We don't have to apologize for anything. We need to emphasize what are our assets. What are the things that we do really well? What are the things we can excel in the future? And if we can identify those things and communicate that to the public, then we're going to do great. The nice thing is that Cleveland State is doing well. You've had a long history now for probably 40 years at least. I think there's great support that exists within the state. The reality is that funding has dropped so much in terms of the percentage of our operational budget. 20 years ago, you're probably getting 80% of your operational budget from state appropriations. Now you're getting probably about 40, 45%. It might be a little different from what we have at Jackson State. That is a huge change. And so that means that more of that burden goes to students in terms of tuition and fees. Or there's another possibility, and this is what I'm doing right now in my current job at Jackson State, and that's really looking for that third leg of the stool. You got your state appropriations coming in, you've got tuition dollars coming from students or through their financial aid, but we have to be more proactive about developing resources. Community colleges, by and large, over the years have not done much about fundraising. We all have foundations, but they're really not having a huge impact on our operational budget. They're bringing in some nice money for scholarships, and that needs to continue. But we need to be more proactive about going out into the community, developing relationships and partnerships and seeking donations and not being apologetic for it. Because the more that we can do that, the more that we can supplement our budget so that we don't continually have to downsize, reduce staff, and things of that nature. That has been a killer to the system over the years, and now we have to find a way to build that back up. All right. How are we doing on time? We good, Mr. Moderator? I bet they've got more questions, though, and I'm happy to stay as long as they want to.
Any more questions? All right, Kate.
I have 2 questions.
All right.
First, in the subject of athletics, what role do you see it playing as, and how do you support it?
Well, I'm tempted to say I've been an athletic supporter for a long time.
Well, you're a music fan. I heard you say you're a music fan and everything like that, so it's not
Some people got that, some people didn't. Well, I have supervised athletics in many of my positions over time. As I was doing student services at Jackson State, oversaw the athletic department at Maryville College for 14 years, oversaw Division III athletics there. At Lambuth University, we were dealing with NAIA, and we moved to Division II. Almost did, let's put it that way. And when I was at Maryville College, we developed a new athletic conference, and the athletic director and I spearheaded that with other colleges to form an athletic conference. And then with our football coach, we developed another conference so that they would have a home because the first one did not. I've always been involved with athletics. My kids grew up going to athletic events at every college that we've ever worked at. At Jackson State right now, I am the PA announcer for all of our basketball games. It's my thing. I used to do radio basketball for a number of years and really enjoyed that. So and this is an example. Our athletic director says, we need volunteers to help out with putting on our events. They just don't have the staff to do it. So I said, do you have an announcer for your basketball games? Well, no, we usually come up with somebody at the last minute. And I said, I'll do them. And so for the last couple of years, I'm kind of the voice of Jackson State at the basketball games. So a couple of years ago when we had the basketball conference on our campus, I was doing those games there as well. So I believe in athletics because it adds so many different components to the campus. And I don't know how it works here, but I hope there's a good amount of participation that faculty, staff, students turn out for those things, because I think community colleges, because of the difficulty in engaging students in a lot of activities and that sense of getting back in the car and going home, there are not a lot of things to go participate in or go see. But the athletics here. So I assume you have basketball for men and women, you've got softball and baseball, is that right? We need something in the fall to kind of make some things happen there as well. But to me, it has an impact on the campus community. It has a lot to do with your sense of community. And people take pride in their athletics. And so I've always been involved with that. I'm a big supporter. We just did our Title IX participation study this past year. We really asked students, what are things that you'd like to be involved with that you're not currently doing? The interest rate was not high, but they did tell us a lot of things. They'd like to see more intramural sports. I think that's one place where you can start to get people engaged, and those can be things where students are playing students, or sometimes you get faculty, staff involved. That's always fun. It doesn't always have to be the traditional sports either. It could be frisbee golf, or it could be a night out at the bowling alley. It could be any number of things, but it's being creative. And so I think the motivation is not only to get the staff that support student activities and athletics to do those kinds of things, but to get student government involved with that as well. Student government has money. In our campus, they never spend it all. Well, let's spend it all. I mean, let's do activities that students are going to enjoy and keep doing them. What I found happens all too often is that people will come up with an idea, let's try this. And they'll do it the first year, and the turnout was poor. So what do? They stop doing it. You come up with a good idea, do it a second year, do it a third year. You've got to build that support and build those small victories so that grows over time. So I come from a really strong background on student activities and athletics, and I think that's probably one of the most beneficial things we can make happen is if we can develop those events and activities that students truly participate in. That creates a whole different feel for what it's like to go to Cleveland State. So that was one. Was that both?
Well, the second one was about clubs and organizations.
Yeah.
That
Well, clubs and organizations are really important too, but that's where we need to encourage faculty and staff to be sponsors for student organizations, because at a two-year school, students come and go quickly. And so the faculty and staff can be those sustainers. And so you need to get some dedicated folks that are going to take on different clubs or activities and see that through and make sure that keeps happening. But that's probably the most active thing that we got on our campus are the student clubs. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
The emphasis now is on completion
Right.
as well as you do. But we're finding that many of the times, in fact, probably most of the time, that students drop out due to circumstances beyond our control. We have family issues.
Right.
We have work issues. What do you do about that?
Well, first of all, you have to have lines of communication so that as they're experiencing those problems, they do seek out some help. They let somebody know. One of the ways to do that is to have an early alert program. We developed one at Jackson State, which was similar to what I've done at other schools. We call it the Student Intervention Team. Faculty and staff are the eyes and ears of the college. They're the ones who know best when students are experiencing problems that might cause them to leave school. And so if you can create a network, a communication network that lets a team know. We put together a team of folks that are in some very critical spots within the campus that work a lot with students. They know what's going on. And we also set up a system so that faculty and staff could communicate with an online form to say this is going on with this student. Because what happens a lot of times is you as a faculty member might hear one thing about a student. And in and of itself, you might not think too much about it, but the coach over here might hear something different. Or the counselor in the student services office might hear something different. And you start to see a picture that is much more of a danger for withdrawal because that picture just becomes that much clearer. So we put together the student intervention team that was meeting every other week, and we're bringing all this information together, and we're starting to see the pieces come together because we would get 2 or 3 different things about a particular student, and even though some folks might say, this sounds like Big Brother watching, I'm willing to risk that because if we can identify students that are having difficulty, it might be, they just don't have enough funds to drive to school, or they might have trouble feeding their family. We do a food pantry on our campus that is used heavily, and faculty staff bring things in all the time. But with the student intervention team, you kind of develop that early warning system so that if you can identify a student, then you can develop an intervention strategy. And my approach on that is to find the person who probably has the best connection with that student. It might be their advisor, it might be their coach, it might be a staff member in another office. It might be, they talk to financial aid folks all the time. If you've got a health center, usually the college nurse knows more about everything. But if you can start putting those pieces together and can say, okay, we want to approach this student, here's the best person to do it, they go down, sit down with them, and talk it through. And then to have a network of resources that you can use both on campus and off campus. It might be that we need to get them hooked up with some food stamps. It might be that we need to get them to a counselor. And so we also use that same system to look at students that might be causing some behavioral issues or that we feel they might be a risk. So this whole behavioral intervention process is gaining a lot of steam. Many colleges are jumping on board, and it's promoted by all the tragedies that have happened in schools around the country, but we need to make sure that we're safe. So on one hand, if we're in tune with what are the possible risks for people with withdrawal, we're also going to be in tune with what are some students that are experiencing some things that might worry us about their safety. So our student intervention team this past year developed what we're calling a student assessment guide, and it's kind of like kind of that federal color code from low danger to high danger, where it obviously is not a perfect thing, but we want to provide our faculty particularly some guidelines. If you see a student experiencing some of these difficulties here, these are the kinds of things that typically you should deal with in your classroom and communicate with that student. And then if you see something that seems more serious, these are places where you might want to get someone in the counseling center involved. Or if it gets real serious, we have what we call an immediate response team. And when I was Vice President for Student Services, it was myself, it was our Dean of Students, and it was a professor of psychology who has all the right credentials. And we would be that immediate response team that if somebody was exhibiting a behavior or suicidal threats or whatever it might be, we would go there and make an immediate assessment and then try to get them involved with the resources that they need. So again, the reality is we deal with such a diverse student base who are dealing with all kinds of things, and as an institution of this kind, we're going to deal with all those issues and problems. And we can either say, well, that's not our job, or we can say it is our job, and we're going to try to be as aware and attuned to students as best we can and provide those services both on campus and off campus. So if you don't have something like a student intervention team or behavioral intervention team, then that's something that you might want to consider here. Well, that's the tough thing about those kinds of programs. I've been doing them for years. I developed one similar at Maryville College. And it's really hard to say that if you provide those services, is that what caused somebody to stay? Or that something might happen down the road where they leave anyways. To me, it just makes so much sense. It's a very logical thing. And sometimes you do things because it's the right thing to do. And it's that kind of program. Obviously, you can track your retention rates from fall to spring or from fall to fall. But it's really hard to get at, did those kinds of programs have an impact on those students? The other thing you can do is do some type of assessment after the fact with those students that you actually develop those intervention strategies for, and ask, did this make a difference? Did it cause you to stay in school? So assessment is an important part of the product, but no, I don't have specific numbers to show the impact of that.
Hi, my name is Michelle Anderson. I'm the grant specialist here, and I had a question about grants.
I'm just glad you have a grant specialist here. That's good.
You talked earlier about pursuing additional resources, and my question, of course, is, as president, what would be your strategy for pursuing grant programs?
My strategy would make sure that you're very busy.
I already am.
That's my short, not so funny answer. And we don't have a grants writer right now. And as we developed our institutional advancement division, I think I've convinced the president that we need to have one in the next budget cycle. We're going to put that in. We've just renovated a new office suite for our division, and we have developed an office for a grants writer. The reality is that faculty spend an awful lot of time looking at grants and developing grants, and it's difficult for them to do that on top of all their other responsibilities. I certainly appreciate the ones that do, but some great opportunities out there. So in some ways, the biggest task is finding the grants. And so somebody who can be a headhunter on a regular basis to go out and find those grants and then work with faculty, because I don't think a grant writer can do it all themselves, but if they work with faculty to help develop those, then we have those great opportunities. So that's definitely a part of that third leg of the stool I mentioned earlier, because fundraising is only going to take you so far. I think we can make some great advances in that, but the grants are there from the state and federal government, from foundations and businesses. That's another reason why you want to partner with the businesses in the area. And so I'm just happy to know that you're here, because that tells me that Cleveland State's thinking ahead. They've recognized that it's better to spend some money to make some money. A lot of times we don't think about that. If I learned anything from working at Lambeth, you got to realize that there's a business part of running a college. There's no question that the academic mission is preeminent, like I talked about earlier, but if you're not operating it as a good business, Saks is going to pull your plug faster than anything else, and I've seen it happen. So we have to pay attention to our budget. We need to be proactive, but we also have to be conservative. We have to think about ways in which we can be as efficient as possible, but we have to look for those ways in which we can bring additional funds and resources into the institution, both through fundraising, but also through grants. And so if I were here, I'd like to learn more about what you do, what you've done already, and how we can expand on what you do.
All right, our time allotted is almost up. I think we have one more question here with Sarah.
I'm Sarah Copeland.
Hi,
Oh,
Sarah.
that's really loud. And I'm the director of the library. But I have a question for you about your role as president of a community college and how you would see that relating to the state level. And I guess I'm thinking in terms of the legislature, the chancellor, TBR,
Right.
your peers, and any other stakeholders that you perceive.
Right. Yeah, the political part of it is another huge role for the president. There's no question about it. If I were to sit here in Cleveland and never leave campus, I'm doing you a disservice. Locally, there's your local legislators, not only in terms of your mayors and city managers, but also your state legislators. To me, those have been some of the best relationships that I've developed in West Tennessee. You get to know them through organizations and Rotary and things of that nature, but it seems like I keep running into them at all the events that I go to, and I try to be visible off campus as well. And so that makes a big impact. I think it's important to get to know our U.S. senators. And so making contact with Senator Corker's office, and we have an office in Jackson, and we've made that connection already. Nice thing about coming from Maryville is that there's connections with Lamar Alexander already. In fact, the story was that Lamar Alexander's mother and father met at Maryville College, so we've had that conversation before. Not that I know him personally, but you start making those contacts, you develop those relationships. The TBR relationship is huge. I got to know Chancellor Morgan when we were going through the process with Lambuth University. He got to know me because I was engaged in that process of how can we make this happen. And there was a long decision-making process of whether or not that would even occur. And so he was on our campus several times. We developed that relationship. I've gotten to know him through our sub-council meetings and things of that nature. Vice Chancellor Nichols. I mean, to me, this is one of the most exciting things about community colleges is that we have our own Vice Chancellor now. When Governor Bredesen appointed our Chancellor to his current position, he really tasked him to do several things, one of which was to do the Complete College Act and get that going, and he's done that. The other thing is to start a new organization about community colleges, and that's why we now have a Vice Chancellor about community colleges. And so I've gotten to know both those gentlemen pretty well. I think they know who I am. There's not a problem of having a lot of meetings with TBR. They do it all the time. And so I think I'd be beating the path between up 24 between here and Nashville quite a bit. But I'm comfortable with that. I've done that in the past. But I think I take responsibility for that by getting out and meeting them. I can't wait for people to come to me. I think I've got a leg up in that I've done that with TBR. I've had good success with that in West Tennessee. And so one of the first things I'd want to do here in this area is get to know our local legislators and have conversations about how can we strengthen the opportunities that exist for Cleveland State. Did that answer your question? All right, thank you. You want me to wrap things up, or are you going to wrap things up?
You wrap it up.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I mean, the past hour plus has gone by really fast. But I just want you to know that I'm here in a very genuine way. I love what I do. I love being an educator. I love being an administrator. I like thinking strategically. I like connecting with people. And so I'm very motivated for this position. And I know you're going to get 3 people who come in here and say the same thing, but I do see this as a calling for me. I also see this as an opportunity to come closer to what I regard as home. That's a great combination in East Tennessee. I can run up to Maryville real fast and see my granddaughter. You won't mind that, will you? No, not at all. So I appreciate your time. It tells me a lot to see so many of you come out for this meeting this afternoon. Obviously, you're invested. You care about what's going on. And if I were to come here to be your president, I'm going to come back and find you and ask you more questions and seek your help, because that's what it takes. It's not going to be me or whoever the new president is. It's the new president who involves you and engages you in the process, and it has you help make things happen. So thank you very much, and have a good afternoon. Yeah. Say goodbye to my sisters. All right.